There's something that happens to a lot of people that you can't notice from the outside. It's the moment before you speak. You feel a sentence rising, and then something in you edits it. It might soften, delay, or swallow it. And you tell yourself it's fine, and you stop because it's not the right time, or it's just not worth it, or someone else might say it better, or I don't want to rock the boat, or even I'll do it later. And so you brush whatever that was under the carpet, but later it becomes a habit, and what you don't say doesn't just disappear. It gathers like dust under a bed. It becomes a story you carry in your body, a story of withholding, shrinking, and waiting. One of the messages I have carried for years in my work, in my life, and in everything I teach is that the things that we don't say, the dreams we don't share, they're often the very things that could change our lives if we just spoke them out loud. Words can literally change lives. And I've been thinking about that a lot in the world we're living in right now, because stories are everywhere. Opinions are everywhere, and noise is everywhere. And yet, so many people are still living with a voice that stays tucked up inside them. So, today's episode is about carrying that story forward as a kind of responsibility. Because we're not just listeners and absorbers of stories, we're carriers and authors. And we're the ones who decide what we take forward and what ultimately survives. Welcome back to Stories in Our DNA. And in the last episode, we explored what stories will survive far into the future and what we're doing to preserve language and culture. And this episode takes that thought and makes it practical for us. It's the episode where hopefully you'll leave feeling, I can do something with this today. Because I want to share something that sits underneath all my work, from my corporate training, leadership coaching, to helping people speak on stages and on TED stages, sharing and influencing and leading with integrity. These are my guiding principles I come back to again and again. They're my golden nuggets, if you were. The first is, a voice not heard is a life not lived. The things we don't say, the dreams we don't share, are the very things that could change our lives if we just spoke them out loud. The second is, growth lies in discomfort. It's way better to face the awkward, uncomfortable moments with honesty and integrity than to keep pretending everything's fine. And the third is, direct words equal direct wins. Speaking with intention and clarity is how we get the results we want. On a stage, in a meeting, in a presentation, or a tough conversation with people we care about. These aren't just the nice ideas for me, they're the foundation of my work. They're why I'm here doing what I do, and they're why I keep coming back to story as a powerful tool to say what you mean with impact and clarity. And if these messages matter, if they've changed lives in the room I've been in, then I don't just want to teach them. I want to be a carrier for them for many years to come, which brings us to the heart of today. In a future where stories are multiplying, accelerating, and shaping how people think and behave, how do we become responsible carriers of story? What can we do today in our own lives to carry the right story forward? That's what this episode is about. And I'm going to give you a framework that you can use immediately. It's called the Story Responsibility Framework, and it's got 4 parts and 4 questions, and we're going to walk it through together. So if you are ready, then let's begin. There's something I think we all feel right now. We are living in a time where stories don't just travel, they do multiply and they spread. They fragment and they distort and they shape reality, sometimes faster than reality can keep up. And I say all this because it makes one thing more important than ever, and that is responsibility. The future will be shaped by the stories that survive. And stories survive when people repeat them, reward them, and embody them, which means we're not powerless to this, and we're not just consumers of story. We are participants in what gets amplified, in what becomes normal, and in what becomes culture. And culture isn't only institutions and media, it's also the jokes you laugh at, the headlines you share, the assumptions you repeat about yourself, the way you speak when it matters, the way you repair after conflict, the way you treat yourself when you're tired, the way you hold boundaries without apology, and so many, many more things. So here's something to ponder. You are both the author and the courier. You carry story forward through what you say, what you click, what you tolerate, and what you model. And if you've ever felt overwhelmed by the scale of the world, that's okay. That's a normal response. But I'm not here to fix the world. It's about holding your corner of it with more consciousness, because that really matters. It matters more than we've been taught to believe. And I've got a practical framework to share to help with this, and I call it the Story Responsibility Framework. And I want to put some backbone behind this because responsibility can sound a bit like a heavy word. And I mean responsibility as response ability. The ability to respond consciously to the stories shaping you and the stories you're shaping. And if you've been with me through this season, you'll know we've been building towards this. Because right back at the beginning, episode 1, the Firelight Beginning, we talked about story as something humans didn't invent for fun. We inherited them for survival. Story was how you learned what was safe and who was trustworthy and where the danger lived and what it meant to belong. Which means story has always been a kind of technology, a meaning machine. And now we're living in a world where that meaning machine is everywhere. So the question becomes, if story is training data for the human heart, what am I training my heart on? What am I training my nervous system on? What am I training the people around me on? That's where this framework comes in. But before I share it with you, I need to share something else. And this is something I've been wrestling with, and I want to say it out loud because this is exactly what this episode is all about. It's my niceness. Yes, we know there's kindness, and we know there's compassion, and we know there's warmth. I mean nice. And nice me is the version of me that stays palatable. This is the version that edits myself, the version that keeps the volume just low enough to be liked, and that feels an invisible tether around my waist the moment I'm about to step forward. And what's really frustrating is my entire career has been built on speaking up and moving through this and rewiring my brain in different ways. Because of my journey, because of my past, I've built a business on helping people name conflict, hold conversations, and stop performing the harmonious dance while resentment grows in the walls. And yet still, you put me in certain rooms, could be a networking room or an unfamiliar corporate room or any other type of room that I've maybe walked into blind, and my nervous system can still default to stay safe, stay likable, and don't be too difficult. I think this is why I'm so passionate about this season and about this episode, because I don't just want to talk about story like it's entertainment. I want to be the carrier for the 3 principles I mentioned for the rest of my life. A voice not heard is a life not lived. Growth lies in discomfort, and direct words equal direct wins. In a future where stories are multiplying and accelerating at such a speed, shaping how people think and behave at scale, how do we become responsible carriers of story? Because stories aren't just what we tell, they are what we repeat, reward, model, and what our children absorb. And this is where I want to use the story responsibility framework on myself through the lens of niceness and the niceness tether that I'm actively rewriting. So here it is. the story of responsibility framework. And number 1 is the story I tell myself, which is all about identity. And it's the most private one, the story I tell myself. And if you've listened to episode 5, which is titled The Story I Tell Myself, you'll remember the whole point wasn't to stop overthinking. And if you haven't listened to that, please do go back and listen to it. The point of that episode is it's about understanding what's actually happening. Because when we experience a gap, when there's silence or uncertainty, our nervous systems do what they have always done since the firelight and try to keep you alive. It asks these 3 ancient questions almost instantly. What's happening? What does it mean? And what should I do? That's the story you tell yourself. And as we explored in episode 5, it's often not an objective report. It's a tribal safety strategy. It's the acronym FATE at work by Chase Hughes. Authority cues light up in the people around you. Sorry, I've got to start with F. F, focus. Focus snaps you onto the threat in your environment. Authority, which is the A, light up in the people around you. Who is in a hierarchy? Who has authority? Who is signaling authority? Tribe means scanning for belonging within that particular group and whether you feel like you belong or whether you've been rejected. And emotion pulls old memories out of the archive and stamps them into the present. So yes, that old script can feel very convincing because, of course, it's not logic. It's driven by survival. And when I think about this for myself, and I think about, honestly, when I shrink back, the story I'm telling myself is something like, if I go to the extra dial, if I put a notch up on my communication dial, something bad's going to happen. Or if I say the thing that's like hovering in my throat, I'll be punished for it. Or if I'm too clear or too bold, I'll be rejected, or I might lose love. And look, that script might have made sense once upon a time. It's old wiring, and it was designed to protect me. Because the nervous system that can't stand uncertainty, that tries to write certainty fast, because once upon a time, not knowing meant danger. And so I don't want to bully that part of me into silence. I just want to become a more responsible author. And here's a new perspective I want to add in this episode. In episode 5, we focused on catching the script whilst it's being written. And today, I want you to notice something even more powerful. Because the story you tell yourself doesn't stay inside you. It leaks. It becomes the story you tell others. It becomes the story you reward, or the one that you believe behind. So if the internal script that you have is, I'm in trouble, I'm not wanted, I'm behind, I have to perform to belong, that doesn't just shape your mood, but of course, your behavior. And behavior is how stories reproduce. So identity isn't only personal, it's cultural. And your inner narrator is training your voice, whether to show up or stay hidden. And because a voice not heard is a life not lived, this is where the responsibility becomes liberation. Which means the practical move here is not, I must be fearless. It's what we've been practicing all season. Because your future story starts with the story you stop believing in private. And we've got this script to signal switch, which is a tiny tool you can do in real time, and it's designed to sit on top of the episode 5 tools without repeating them. So go back and listen to that if you haven't done already. When you catch yourself in a spiral, mid-gap, do this. Step 1, name the script in a sentence. So you already taught this and it's gold. So the story I'm telling myself is, they're angry, I'm excluded, I've messed up, I'm behind. Name it. Name the story you're telling yourself in that moment when you're trying to fill in the gap. Step 2 is name the signpost. And so this isn't necessarily the story now, this is what's underneath it. And you can choose between focus, authority, tribe, and emotion. You're basically tagging the fate trigger quickly. Am I scanning for a threat in the environment? Is it somebody that's triggering this feeling of deferring to authority? Is it a feeling of not like I don't belong within a tribe, I'm being rejected or ushered out? Or is it an old emotion coming up again? You can name it FATE. Which part of fate is triggering you? And then step 3 is choosing the most likely micro move that can move you forward. So it's a switch from how do I feel better to what's one calm action that gives me information? Because information grounds us in logic. So if, for example, you're experiencing a silence, a gap in communication that you're filling with stories that you're telling yourself, then a clean, clarifying message to the person that you want to communicate with, not 5 follow-ups or over-explaining, is going to be the best move forward. If it's a look someone gives you in a room, maybe you've given a presentation and someone rolling their eyes, one direct question that grounds reality could be, what are your thoughts on that? If it's you comparing yourself to someone else and filling in the gaps and telling yourself a story that isn't true, then it could be one action that improves your timeline. So what are you doing? And how are you staying in your lane to keep yourself focused? So I'll end with this line, which is a really important way to think of it. A gap is not a verdict. So if you have a gap and you're filling it with the story you're telling yourself, it is not the verdict. Because that was one of the biggest takeaways in episode 5. The gap is just a gap. Your nervous system writes drama because it wants certainty, but you, the author, get to choose the evidence. You get to choose the next behavior from most likely, not worst case. So identity, responsibility in this framework is not, I'm never going to spiral or I never have fear. It's just, I'm going to catch the script, I'm going to tag the trigger, and I'm going to choose one calm action that makes me the author again. And when you do that, even once, you've changed the future because you've stopped passing an old survival story forward. You've started carrying a truer, more honest one instead. Okay, that's the story you tell yourself. Now we're going to move outward to the story you tell others. So number 2 is the story I tell others, and that's all about influence. Okay, this is one about stories you speak out loud and to narrate into rooms. And it's often hidden in the smallest phrases. It's the words before your idea, or the way you introduce yourself, or the way you frame what you want, or what you ask for, or don't ask for, because influence is how clearly you narrate reality. And this is where my line, a voice not heard is a life not lived, and direct words equal direct wins, becomes really practical. Because influence is often decided before the idea lands. It's in the preface or the framing and the way you place yourself into the sentence. For example, listen how often people do this. Sorry, just a quick one. This may be a silly question, but I'm probably wrong, however, or I don't mean to be difficult, or it's not a big deal, but. And none of these phrases are bad, they're just human and protective. But they're also micro stories. I'm small. My needs are inconvenient. My ideas are optional. And here's the brutality. The room believes the story you tell about you. Because humans take social cues. And so your influence responsibility is to tell a truer story out loud in real time. Let me give you a few swaps. Instead of, sorry, just a quick one, you can try, I want to be clear. Instead of, this might be silly, but you can try, this matters. Instead of, I don't want to be difficult, try, I want to say something. Instead of, I'll just try, here's what I recommend. And I want to name something we touched on in the hero's journey trap conversation in episode 7, the story we inherited. And again, if you haven't listened to that, please go back and listen to it. So many people think influence requires a dramatic story, a big tragedy or a massive turning point. But in reality, influence is usually built through small moments of self-narration. It's built through clarity and boundaries and speaking when it would be easier to stay silent. Let's give an example. You're in a meeting. Someone takes your idea and they run with it. The old story might be you say nothing because you don't want to be that person. The new story is you speak with clean, direct words. I'm glad this is landing. Just to be clear, that was the point I raised earlier, and I'd really like to build on it. Warm, clear, and true. And that is story of responsibility in action. Not conflict for conflict's sake. It's just reality, narrated with integrity. This is you being the author in the moment, not later in your head, not in a rewrite after the fact, but in the moment. So here are a few places to listen for the story you tell others. Do you preface yourself with those things? I'm probably wrong. This isn't important, but I don't want to be difficult. Listen to what you say, because I don't want to police politeness, but I'm here to name something that changes everything. The words before your idea are often the real message. They tell the room how to hold you, because it's not only whether you have the voice, it's whether your voice shows up inside the story, and that is the story you tell others. Number 3 is the story I reward, and this is about amplification. But this one is quiet, but it's huge, because story isn't only what you tell, but it's what you feed. And this is where modern life gets really, really real, because in an attention economy, your attention is a vote. And the culture you live in is being shaped by billions of micro votes. What you click, what you share, what you laugh at, what you forward, what you rewatch, what you reward with outrage, you're feeding a culture. And again, I'm not shaming here, right? We're all human, but I want to bring it into consciousness. Questions to ask for the stories you reward are, what kind of story gets your attention fastest? Is it outrage? Is it drama? Is it fear, perfection, shame, other people's downfall? What do you reward with outrage? What do you reward with admiration? Who benefits from the story you're amplifying? What are we rewarding? Is it the most sensational version, or is it the most honest version? Let's make it practical. This is a bit of a mean example, but I see it a lot out there in the ether. And if you spend 20 minutes a day consuming humiliation content, for example, people getting owned or mocked or shamed or torn down or roasted, that trains your nervous system to associate attention with cruelty, right? It normalizes contempt, and it makes it easier to treat other humans as entertainment, because the future isn't shaped by big decisions alone. It's shaped by what becomes normal. So here are a few prompts. What kind of story gets your attention fastest? What emotion does that spark in you? Do you feel more human after you consume it, or less? And who benefits from you staying hooked on it? So you can think about clicking and sharing and being more conscious about that. You can choose the stories you stop feeding and the ones to feed instead. And it can be as simple as nuance or repair or courage, and rewarding those things. People telling the truth even when it's awkward. Creators who make you feel more human, not more reactive. All of those little micro moments of choosing what you feed. And this is how you become a carrier for the world you want. And number 4, the final element of the story responsibility framework is the story I leave behind. It's legacy. And this is where I bring it home. Because whether we like it or not, people are learning the story from us all the time. What people learn from being near you, your friends, your team, your clients, your community, especially your children. They learn how we repair after we snap, how we apologize without excuses, how we own our mistakes, how we ask for what we need, how we speak about impact, how we speak when it would be easier to stay silent. And my legacy story, the one I want to leave behind, is this: that the quieter, nice ones can be seen, heard, and understood by being honest and bold and clear, by being brave enough to step into discomfort and stay there long enough for growth to happen. The thing is, I don't want my kindness to swamp my boldness. I want my kindness to hold my boldness, because in the end, that is what the story we are still writing means for me. I'm not here to fit in. I'm here to carry a story forward that says your voice matters. Discomfort is the doorway, and direct words create direct wins in your life, your work, your relationships, and your future. So if you say boundaries matter, but you never rest, your children might learn boundaries are optional. If you say tell the truth, but you swallow yours to keep the peace, your team learns harmony is more valuable than honesty. And if you say be confident, but you speak to yourself with contempt, the people around you learn confidence is performative and not embodied. But here's the hopeful bit. Legacy is built in small moments and memories of how you show up. And so it's about understanding what that looks like for you. So whereas for me, it might be how I repair without snapping, how I apologize without making excuses, how I own my mistakes, how I take responsibility, how I speak clearly when I would want to disappear. What does that look like for you? What are those small moments where you're building legacy through the story that you're building, that you want to leave behind? This is what people remember, it's what people copy, and it's what becomes story. So this is the final responsibility. Live the story you want to leave behind. What do people learn about boundaries by watching you? What do people learn about courage by watching you? What do people learn about worth by watching how you speak to yourself? And fill your own blank that matches the legacy you want to leave. Legacy isn't what you say you believe, it's what your behaviour makes believable. So that's it. That's the story responsibility framework. We have identity, the story I tell myself. We have influence, the story I tell others. We have amplification, the story I reward, and legacy, the story I leave behind. And we can't do all four of these perfectly, but we can become more conscious of where we're carrying an old story and we want to carry a new one forward. Let's zoom out one last time. The future isn't only written by the loudest stories, it's written by the most repeated ones, and the repetition is not just the algorithms, it's us, humans, as carriers. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Voice not heard is a life not lived. So let your voice live in the story you tell yourself, in the story you tell others, in the story you reward, and in the story you leave behind. And in the final episode of Stories in Our DNA, I'll be sharing a story I have written called The Story That Finds You. See you next time.